I have been Travers from IndieWire. Thank you so much for coming out. Let's go ahead and get this thing started by getting everybody, all the talent, up here. First and foremost, we're going to start with the cinematographer from Justified, City Primeval, John Lindley.
Still seems to Jonah one over there off in the distance.
Next up, we've got the costume designer for All Mankind, Esther Marquis. Also from For All Mankind, the production designer, Seth Reed. Our costume designer from The Wheel of Time, Sharon Gilham. The puppeteer behind that incredibly violent clip that we just watched on Gen V, also in the makeup department, is Colin Penman. And last but certainly not least, the production designer behind Twisted Metal, Victoria Paul. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. I'm so excited to dig into this panel. We've got some audience questions that we'll get into at the very end. But to start off with, one of the themes of this panel, like in the synopsis for everybody who is getting excited to come here today, was kind of talking about how a lot of your jobs revolve around building an immersive experience for the audience. So the audience has to buy into every little detail of the story that they're watching, and it all has to kind of coordinate and come together. So Seth, I wanted to start by asking you, I want to know a little bit about when you're getting the job, when you're coming on board, when you're making your pitch, when you're talking to the different people about getting involved with the show. How important is past experience? So for you, you worked on Cosmos, you worked on From Earth to the Moon, Emmy, nominated, wonderful shows. Did that help you in terms of getting For All Mankind? And if not, what was kind of essential about, saying I'm the one for this? I have the vision, I can map this out for you and build this immersive environment.
Well, first of all, thank you, Ben. I'm very honored to be here with all of you, and I'm among some incredibly talented people, collaborators here. So, and I just want to mention just right off the bat that all of us work together on all of our shows. We're all part of a team: costumes, makeup and hair, set deck, and of course our cinematographer. As far as answering the questions that you just asked, I would say that my background is as an architect, and I was an anthro major before I was an architect when I graduated UCLA. So I'm bringing to the table a knowledge of history, and an appreciation for maybe humanity. And I also am very interested in design and creating new forms and new shapes. So when I was on Cosmos, for example, this was a wide-ranging show that broadly appealed to me because it had touched every single thing that I would be wanting to do, between designing architecture and searching for the history of mankind. When I came on The Expanse, which you didn't mention, but which I'm a great show, very proud of, we got to, thank you. We got to create a whole new world. So it's the first time I got to literally be part of just figuring out what things would be in the future and what they would look like. Again, this all fit right into my paradigm for what I'm interested in doing. So when I went to For All Mankind, I think you come into the room with confidence, you tell them the kind of things you've been doing and what you're interested in. In my case, it was designing architecture for space, and it worked perfectly. Spaceships, huge, beautiful buildings on Mars, and every other environment I can possibly think of that is historically relevant and not so fictional, maybe more science-based than some other shows.
Well, you mentioned obviously collaboration is a really important part of this, and when I think of collaboration on TV, I usually think of the time crunch that everybody faces because TV is made so quickly. You're making a lot of episodes, you're making a lot of hours, and usually it's being turned around in a year, maybe two, but it very much depends on the show. So Esther, I wanted to ask, in terms of again building that immersive experience. How do you kind of set your visions for the costumes for All Mankind while staying on the same page as the other department heads? So what kind of tips and experience came in that was so valuable to you to make that communication as efficient as possible, to keep everybody on the same page? Who are you talking to, basically when you're starting out, to make sure that it's all aligned?
I talk to everyone.
That sounds busy.
All the time. Over and over. It's very busy. That's at the very sort of core of our creative contributions, is that it's a collaboration and that we can't do it without each other. And I feel like, especially for costumes, we're moving into these worlds, these architectural worlds, and we're looking for the word realism, and in order to accomplish that, it's like we're in concert, visual concert with one another in terms of the scenery and in terms of costumes and in terms of lighting. And so there's this beautiful, delicate balance that we're all trying to strive for, but we can't do it without communication. There's a lot of spacesuit work on our show, and that's also requiring a certain element of technical aspects to it. So there's, again, more conversation. But from a visual point of view, you're always contextualizing where these pieces, your design pieces are going to live, what world they're going to live in, and if there's truth to it. I know it sounds sort of all highfalutin, but you always have to ask yourself the question: does this look real? Is this true? And sometimes it's not, and sometimes we go back to the drawing board. But as you said before, the process of TV work is very quick, and it's this steam engine that's on a path. So once you begin work on a show, there's no looking back. So you're bringing all of your expertise and experience to the forefront. So you're answering questions quickly and hopefully correctly.
No, absolutely, that's great. And to kind of, I guess, even go a little more basic and to stay in the costume realm, Sharon, if you want to chime in on this too, is there usually a point person? Is there somebody you're talking to the most to make sure that those details and visions and everything lines up, that it is truthful, that it is accurate, that it does honor whatever needs to be honored, whether it's the script or the actual things that you're referencing, or is it again, like you mentioned, you're talking to everybody, so it's just constantly going from one person to the next?
Our point people are the creators, those that have written the scripts and are in charge of the visual and also the content of our TV production, showrunners essentially. So they're the sort of anchor points of the production, and from there everybody's sort of providing information, and that information is also being sort of turned around and funneled back to various people. Am I correct?
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. I mean, also, we were discussing this earlier, but the conversations with the actors are very much part of it as well, so that we're making sure that we're all on the same page in terms of their character development and how they see the character. And in my case, there's also the Wheel of Time. I don't know if there's any Wheel of Time fans here, but there's a lot of fans out there who've read all the books and are really, really very knowledgeable about all the detail. And so I kind of consult that information. I go back to the script is obviously the first point of call, but the knowledge that people have and all the information that's out there about the characters online is also feeds into it. So it's a real mix with that, and then, you know, you work with the production designer, the hair and makeup department. In my case, is very, very powerful connection that we had. We worked very carefully together to create these looks and designs for the new cultures, specifically like the Shongshan, which is a big new culture in season 2. And that those conversations are invaluable. And again, it goes back to collaboration and communication. And none of us are on our own, you know, and I had a big department because we manufactured most of the costumes. So those people in my team are also really, really valuable, and getting their input on a show of this size is very important. You can't do it on your own. It's, you know, you have to have people around you that you trust to bring their ideas to the table as well.
Well, with The Wheel of Time specifically, because it is an adaptation of something that is so popular, that so many people have imagined in their own heads or, you know, have a direct reference for from the page, honestly, how much leeway do you have when you're working to, you know, whether you're talking to the showrunners or whether it's an idea originated on your own end, to say, like, I think this would work better for us. I think this would work for what we're trying to do. And, you know, it balances the what was originally there, or it has an answer for what was originally there. Like, how much leeway did you have?
Well, the showrunner is a massive fan of the books, Rafe Judkins, so he will always bring it back to, this is what's in the books, this is where it starts. The story is lots of these different cultures in a world, nations in a world, and each nation is a mix of 2 cultures in our world. All that information is in the books, you know, in huge amounts of detail. I've never read a script before that has so much costume detail in it. And so we use that. I use that information as very much a starting point. And then I take those 2 different cultures. So, for example, the Shongshan are Mesoamerican and Imperial Chinese. So then you've got all that information culturally that you can put into the mix. And then there's sort of certain frameworks and certain ways that you have to create the costumes. They have to look as if they were made pre-Industrial Revolution. So that's another thing to put into the mix. But Rafe always encouraged me to go a little bit, to bring something of my own to each culture. So, for example, the Shongshan are described as insect-like. So I use this idea of mandibles and insect sort of iconography in one of the female characters. But then I expanded it into reptilian. That's not in the books, but I can always justify it to the fans if they ask me, because, you know, it's a coherent set of ideas that I brought to that culture that doesn't change, and it passes on down as we experience more and more of the characters from that world.
Do you get a lot of pushback from fans? Like, do you, like, again, like I'm a little bit outside of that world, and I'm always curious when people are dealing with, properties that have pre-existing relationships from the people who are, most invested, or at least, have that. Do you get that a lot? Do you get people coming to you being like, well, hold on now, this is not what I read. This is not what I imagined.
Yeah, you do. Obviously, I did season 2, and I hadn't read the books. I have to put my hand up. But, so I didn't get any feedback while we were making it, which is great, because I was just allowed to be free and play. But afterwards, yeah, people do. On my Instagram page, I'm putting the costumes out there, and we took the costumes apart and talked about how they were made. And I want people to know that I've really considered it. And if it has changed, there's a reason for that change. It's not just a flippant decision, I really believe in those books, and I respect people's love for the books. You can't take that away, you have to listen to that. Most of the time, the feedback's been positive, because if anybody asks me a question, I will just explain why. And we had a sort of we had a show and tell in Prague before season 2 came out. And we had a lot of influencers and people from social media who came to see, so we talked about the costumes because the actors and writers couldn't. And they came in and they were very excited about seeing this display of the costumes. And they were like, but why did you do that? Or why didn't you do that? And I was like, for this reason, this reason, this reason, this reason. We couldn't do that because of VFX. We couldn't have an actual physical chain on somebody's neck because of VFX. And they were like, oh, okay. And it's fine.
I love that you had the opportunity to answer. Like, one of the things that can be frustrating is if you just see those comments kind of out in the ether and you can't actually respond to them. All right, so John, when we're talking about properties that are beloved and that have these fan bases around them, when you're making, a sequel to Justified, which people love, or an extension of Justified, or however we want to call City Primeval, obviously this new show has its own look. Like, it's rooted in Detroit and it has like very distinct visual style. But what are you starting with? Like, what is your original point to be like, I'm going to talk to the showrunners, I'm going to see what they want to do with it, but also like, how do I keep this in the family, but also make it its own thing?
I start with fear. That's my, no. And,
Me too.
And can I just quickly say I'm flattered to be here and very honored to be among this group of artists. And one of the great things when we talk about world building is we all know what each other does. And we know with very specific roles. I'd be thrilled to work with any or all of these people starting tomorrow. And that's the challenge, but also the beauty of what we do. I'll say this about Justified. The showrunner asked me to do the show. And I had never seen the original. Was on for many seasons, and that helped me a lot because when I talked to the showrunner, he said, well, you don't have to make it look like it ever did, and I thought, well, that's good because I never saw it. And I go out of my way. I read a lot of Elmore Leonard books, but I go out of my way not to read the source material for a particular project. I've done a bunch of adaptations, but if I read the source material, then I fill in a bunch of blanks that are not in the script or in the story. So for Justified, for me, one of the draws was Detroit, right? Every city has an ethos, or we all think Chicago's the murder capital of the United States. It isn't, right? We all think Detroit is the apocalyptic urban landscape of the United States. It's one of many, right? But it has a certain look, and the Midwest does, and the light in the Midwest in the winter is very hard and very contrasty. And that informed how I wanted to do the show. And I had a lot of support from the showrunner who originally was going to direct them all. Oh, wow. So that was fine. I could do whatever I wanted. And then gradually he gave half of them to other directors. But that was the kind of freedom that I yearned for when I worked.
Was that Michael Dinner?
Mm-hmm.
Was that? Okay, yeah, that's right. Okay. So, sorry, just to really quickly, did you watch the original? Like, did you go back and see?
I ended up watching the pilot.
Okay.
But again, I find it can take me in the wrong direction. The biggest challenge for me doing my work is to undo what I know how to do. And if I have a reference point, I'm liable to lean in that direction. Everybody here knows schedules and budgets push us to do the thing that we're most comfortable doing and that we know how to do fastest and cheapest. So my goal is to go back to when I took my first photograph and I didn't know what I was doing. Then I'll do my best work if I can figure that out.
That's from the root of fear, like right there. When going back to the beginning, you're just like, oh, I've never done it before. How do I do this? Figure it out. That's great.
Right, and that's difficult. That takes real discipline on a TV schedule and a TV budget to put aside what you know how to do quickly and cheaply.
Again, I was talking about this a little bit earlier, but I have no idea how anything gets finished as miraculously as it does, like immaculately as it turns out. So I wanted to go back a little bit to talking about experience. And Victoria, when I was looking over some of the stuff that you'd made before you got to Twisted Metal, there were a few things that stood out. One was the movie Breakdown with Kurt Russell, which is a movie that I love, which is part of why it stood out. Then I also noticed Black Dog. So you've had experience working with cars and driving, like movies and series that are kind of rooted in that mentality. Does that help you when you're, talking to the Twisted Metal producers about getting onto the gig? Like, what is your reference point? What are you coming in with? What are you kind of saying to be like, I'm a good fit here?
Well, I would say I didn't think of them at all when I was talking to the showrunner about getting the job. That thank you for that connection. Thanks for making connections. What it did help with on the show was I was really very comfortable in talking to our special effects crew and our stunt drivers, because we had a lot to do with cars. We had cars all over the place all the time. Everything blew up, things fell apart. I mean, they were supposed to fall apart. So because I had done those other shows, I was just comfortable with that language. So we had a terrific collaboration, which was really important for that show. I mean, we had to have, it was one of those shows where all are essential collaborators for me, for Seth, that we always work with our decorator, costumes, hair and makeup, our DP, of course. They were in that circle, but in a very large way, in that particular show, we added VFX or VFX supervisor, we were in constant communication, as well as with stunts and particularly physical effects, special effects, because we had to build a lot of stuff to their specifications.
So with, I guess when we're talking about Twisted Metal, one of the things that stood out to me when I was watching it, it did remind me of the video game. And I have kind of older, outdated memories of the video game, but as soon as it started, I was reminded of it in a way, but I could not put my finger on exactly what that was. So for you, what was essential about, the source material to bring to the show in terms of the look and the feel, or do you kind of just trust, again, like the scripts to handle that? But it did visually remind me, like when I was looking at it, so.
Well, I will admit here that I had never seen the video games. I didn't play the video games. I am not that demographic. So it was really good for me because I wasn't tied to it. I mean, the things that once I got the job, went back and researched were the vehicles, because that was all anybody talked about was like, oh, Sweet Tooth's truck and this vehicle and that vehicle. So we did pay attention to the vehicles. But if you actually look at the video games, there is no there. There is no world. There are vehicles. There are no people except as defined by their vehicles. Like the only person you ever see is Sweet Tooth if he's a person. And there's no world. There's just this kind of ambiguous space that cars can blow up in and crash around in. So for us, it was wonderful because we got to design the world our showrunner wrote.
Did you have to put more of an emphasis, I guess, on like the roads themselves? It was one of those things, like especially in the pilot when I was watching it and they were kind of driving down different streets and different kind of, back roads and stuff like that, where I was like, okay, this is a post-apocalyptic landscape, but the asphalt is still smooth enough for them to traverse. Like, how much thought do you have to put into that aspect of it? Because that could be a script essential where they're just like, listen, he's got to be able to get from here to there. So, but
no, actually a lot. There were some locations we really wanted to shoot in that our drivers, Nicks, they were like, we can't. It's too pitted. We can't do the stunt that's being asked for. So the thing that would govern a lot of those choices was the stunt.
oh, okay.
So if it was on motorcycles or this car, whatever it was, if we picked a location, they had to be able to do the stunt that was envisioned. So there were times when we had to actually patch some of the roads. That was sort of the mandate. It was a stunt movie and we were supposed to blow stuff up.
And that comes back to what you were saying about your experience, where like it's so important for you to be able to have that communication with that team to effectively get everything done that you needed to get done.
We were in constant communication with those guys. As I was building the vehicles, I would be like, hey, come over to, the vehicle fabricating shop. I can meet you there in an hour. Let's look at this. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Let's move the steering wheel. We really built all of those vehicles.
Well, Colin, I honestly didn't know how to approach a question with you that related to experience, because everything that I saw that like in the puppets that we saw in this video, everything that I saw in Gen V, like it felt, unprecedented is a very big word, but it felt like stuff that wasn't easily referenced. It wasn't something that you could point to on a piece of paper and be like, listen, I did this already. I can do it again. Hire me. So what is it for you that kind of like sets yourself apart? Like, how do you go in saying, I can see what this is going to be and make them trust you to execute?
I think a lot of it is kind of a reputation that I've built. I started in prosthetic makeup pretty strictly for about the first 15 years or so of my career. And then I kind of branched into doing regular makeup, straight makeup, beauty, just trying to get it all in there. And about 25 years ago, maybe longer than that, I was asked to help out on a little kid show called Zaboomafoo, which I don't know if any of you remember that. And they wanted to make this lemur puppet, but they wanted it to have a slightly more realistic face. But the company were used to making sort of the Muppet style puppets, you know, the foam and the fleece, kind of like what you saw on screen there. So I helped them with that, and in doing so, I was introduced to their world of these puppets, like children's television in Toronto in Canada. And so I stayed there for a few years, and I learned puppeteering, I learned how to build the sort of traditional style puppet, and then that kind of phase of my life moved on, and I went back to makeup, and here we are. So first of all, when I got the call about Gen V, I had no idea that the puppets were a thing. Nobody knew that was coming. But the producer who called me, I'd worked with her before on American Gods and this other show called Killjoys, where I had done kind of the makeup and the prosthetic side of production. So she kind of knew me as the one-stop shopping thing. And that's kind of how I sell myself, because there's a lot of people specialize in either straight makeup or prosthetic makeup, but not a lot of us who kind of do both at a level. So when she called, she said, hey, I've got this project that I'm doing, and I think it's right up your alley, and it's gonna be really fun. The scripts are awesome. It's a spin-off of The Boys. And I was like, stop, I'm in, no problem. Because The Boys to me is like, I love that show. And that also shoots in Toronto, and I've been, for years I was trying to figure out how to get on that show. So Gen V came along, and it was an opportunity for me to make my own version, of The Boys in that universe. So that's, again, there's not, it's just weird. It's like that show, like I said, I didn't know the puppet thing was going to be coming, but it's like that show was put in my future, and everything that I kind of worked on just led to this point, and all of a sudden, all my past, sort of came together in one production. So it's pretty cool.
Well, obviously, that reputation is well earned. And again, not to keep coming back to the same themes or questions or whatever, but I have to imagine that if you're the one-stop shop and you're in charge of all these things, and you've kind of built this reputation on, listen, you can trust me to get these wild ideas done, to create this thing that you kind of just have half sketched in your mind. Is timing a big problem for you? Like in TV, everything moves so quickly. So like, how do you maintain your good reputation while still accomplishing things on a schedule that usually asks people to do the impossible?
I think the simplest answer to that is I surround myself with really talented people who are like-minded like me. Like when somebody asks me if I can do something, my answer is always yes. Even if I have no clue at the moment, I'll figure it out. So my crew, I have about, probably about 10 or 12, full-time people on my team, and then we bring in, but they all sort of have the same mindset as I have, because you can't go into a project like that, and when somebody says, hey, we want to build this thing and we need it in 2 days, and you go, no, I don't think we can do that. That's not the answer that anybody wants to hear. So myself, my crew, when something comes in, we get excited about it. And it's like, okay, how are we going to build this? And then how are we going to build it in days sometimes? We made some, you saw the puppets there, but we also made some large pieces. We made a giant ear. We made a giant penis. We made, all sorts of crazy, wacky stuff. But I'd say, the timing is very tight, and they do provide me with the resources that I need to get the job done. And I get a lot of help from the ADs, from the assistant directors in scheduling. They'll push things, as far down the road as they can to give us the maximum amount of time. But definitely, on a show like that, it's time is a crunch. But it's the mental state, I think, that you can do this. If we have to stay up all night, we'll stay up all night, but we'll get it done.
That's exactly the attitude that I've seen or heard from, I should say, from a lot of successful people. So that it's not surprising, but I'm just in awe that anything actually gets made. Going to kind of a bigger picture question for the room. A lot of people in here are working on things that originated with intellectual property. They originated earlier, and now they're becoming a TV show. And that's a trend that we're seeing, grow and grow and grow across Hollywood. And from a creative mindset, from people who are making costumes, who are building sets, who are shooting, like a vision, how do you feel about that? Like, does that help your creativity? Does it inhibit your creativity to like have kind of a source material reference point coming into a project as opposed to literally just words on a page from an original idea that somebody dreamt up in their mind and you get to dream it up yourself? And I'm sorry, this is not designated for anyone in particular, so if anybody has a thought, just please jump in. I'm very curious.
I'll start. I mean, I've worked on other shows that are from IP, other IP that didn't originate with script. But I can only speak for myself here. I've tended to kind of put on some blinders and look at what the script says and look at what the showrunner intends. I mean, I don't ignore, and this is very different from your show because you have such rabid fans and so many books and so much material. But I did a show, A League of Their Own, and there was a movie, so that was some original IP. We did a series out of it, and the movie is quite well known. The images from the movie, some of the lines from the movie are rather well known, and we talked about it a lot. And then Will wrote the scripts. And what our day-to-day conversation was about what he wrote. Right? So we didn't, and our research was period research. It was the kind of research we all do for a period show. It was period research. We looked at photographers of the period. We looked at baseball stadiums of the period. We did all of that. So we went back to original research. We didn't use the film as our research.
I'm just going to jump in and say the number one issue, I think, for everybody in this up here is research. I'm just going to key off of that. So it can be something that is historical, and that's obvious what the research is, but it can also be a situation where you're presented with a blank slate and you've got to come up with something, and the best way in, the best doorway into that is research. The second you show up in the room and you have, whether it's in the world of costumes, for example, or in production design, the second you show up in the room with a series of compelling images that you're in love with, maybe they're relevant, exactly, key, they struck you, and you come in with those, you've got a way to talk to the writers. At that point, the conversation can go anywhere. Like in our show, we have no book to go off of, we have no reference, we have a minor amount of historical, if you consider NASA to be our primary source for things, but we've quickly deviated from that. So all the time we're using research. Right now, I've got Frank Stella, the artist, as a reference. I have the artwork of Elysium as a reference. So there's all kinds of things that you pull in and you just put them on the wall and see what happens.
Yeah, that's a fantastic answer, and it answered a few things in my head about For All Mankind, and because you're just finished the 4th season, 5th season's coming, so like you've had so much time to build this alternate history, and it's been so interesting to see, things that you recognize and things that obviously are just completely new and original. That's just
okay. Well, I'll jump in again for one quick sec, since Victoria mentioned the script. In our show, the script is very, very key. Without that script, we would be nowhere, because honestly, we get it, we see the words, and then we finally know what our writers are intending for our characters, because up to that point, we did not know. And it then follows with a long series, I know you go through this too, Esther, a long series of conversations with our producers, with our directors, and with our DP, our cinematographer, about what this is supposed to be. So it never is crystal clear, I gotta say.
All right, I'm going to get into the audience questions, which I've got up here in just a second. But before we do that, I wanted to go just around the group really quickly and try to highlight or clarify a few things about your specific job and what it's either misunderstood about it or what people don't realize that it includes, and just kind of give an opportunity for you guys to voice that. So please think in your head, for examples, and we'll just start at the end if that's okay. Like, is there anything you want to make sure that people are kind of aware of when it comes to your job?
Well, as a production designer, I think What I often say is, if it doesn't walk and it doesn't talk, we put it there.
That's great. Yeah.
Okay.
You can say the same thing. It's okay.
I think, I think one of the things, obviously, what most of us do is kind of art-based and creative-based, but just speaking, say, from my makeup hat that I wear, when cast comes in at the top of the day, I'm usually the first person they see. They come in the trailer, and we might spend anywhere from an hour to maybe a couple of hours, depending on what we're doing, and then you're off. So the actual makeup application is a very short part of the day. I think what a lot of people don't realize is a lot of it is there's almost like a psychology. So when my cast comes in, I want them to start the day the right way. I don't want them to come in and be inundated with, crazy stories about my life. This is my own, my own philosophy is that I'm there to do a job. I'm there to facilitate them to do their job. I'm not there to talk about myself. You got to know how to read people. You got to know how to read the room. And that's not just cast, that's walking into a concept meeting on any given day. You need to sort of vibe what's going on. And I think that comes with experience. We're just being around other creative people and just, how to get everything, how to get the start of the day, the flow going. Apart from the actual application and the physical work, there's a whole aspect of like psychology to go along with it. Sometimes there's hand holding, sometimes there's, shoulder to cry on. Like, you really never know, but you have to be ready for all of that on top of the everyday work.
That's a fantastic answer. Very, very good. Please, Sharon, what do you have?
I was listening to a podcast the other day with Judi Dench, who's a British actress, and she was talking about how she sees performance and acting, and she said it's like a recipe, and you have to have all the right ingredients, but don't count on just because you've done it really well once, it will work again. So I think that you have to be really aware that, each time is a new time, and you have to be ready to create something new and exciting from the beginning. And the other thing that which I think is what you're talking about, and we've talked about between ourselves, is about what people don't realize, I think, when you work on a big production like this, is you're a kind of manager. And nobody trains you to be a manager in the creative world. And it's really important that you get your team on your side, because when you do, those people will do anything for you, and they will work really long hours, and they will work through the night. But you have to have sort of like a mindset and a way of working with them that is really respectful and creative and encouraging, which I think is not something that people would normally associate with a costume design job. I think people think you either go shopping or you just come in and float around and do some drawings and then float off again. And it's really not like that at all.
That is how I had you in my head, just floating around the set. Seth, please.
Well, I'm just going to go back to the basic, I think, from your question, as I understood it, which is the script is everything. We get all of our clues and all of our tidbits about what we're trying to do off of that script. And then from there, we build out. So we're trying to fulfill our characters. We're in the world of production design and set decoration. We're trying to tell the story behind the story of who our characters are, what things they're gonna want in the room that they're in, and maybe we've even brought those characters to tell their story per the script, and we've shown them their space so they get to know it, they understand where they are. Maybe we give them a little background that we've all invented together that they don't even know about, and we share it with them. And this applies again to costumes as well, and to even your job, Colin. I mean, we're discussing with the actors their character, and we're trying to fulfill the kind of the ambitions that we all have for the show and for the story we're trying to tell. And at the end of the day, the one person who's really gonna help us the most to fulfill our goal and our destiny is this man right here, who's gonna make things look lovely, and he's gonna frame and tell the story a certain way, and he's gonna maybe show off the colors that we've all discussed together, and also, of course, the actor himself.
Very good answer. It actually answers one of the audience questions about actors. So, Esther, please.
Yes to everything that my colleagues have said. There's one thing that I was aware of, but stepping into the role as costume designer, it became apparent. My job is essentially problem solver. I solve problems every minute of the day. And it's typically technical problems in terms of fit, tailoring, construction, materials, fabrication, and then there's the filming aspects, what we need. I mean, the list keeps going on and on and on. So it's also the pace of that problem solving. There's an amazing sort of rush for the finish. I think that's really the most sort of striking role, that I was not really aware of, how much in my head and having to have a solution, but not just one solution, maybe 3 solutions. So it's very interesting.
Giving people options is probably very important for everybody's job because, again, like you mentioned, you just don't know exactly where the problems are going to arise. And again, emphasizes the importance of communication, but experience counts. Thank you so much. John, please, let's wrap up.
So, of course, telling the story is really the foundation of a cinematographer's job, I think. And then honoring the work of these artists, and their intentions with the sets and the costumes and all the colors, and supporting the director who's on a high wire act without a safety net and just saying it's all going to work out even when you're convinced it won't. And then lighting sets so that actors can perform. This room's a perfect example. This is the interrogation lighting. It's sort of like, oh my God. But when you turn the lights down so that we could watch the clips, you can just feel the room kind of relax, right? And that's the spectrum. Everything between is what you do for the scenes. And the actors get a lot from the lighting at the moment, right? They get a lot from the sets. They get a lot from the costumes. They know the lines, right? They know the characters. So, that's all part of my job, and those are all parts that I really enjoy.
I love that you bring up the lighting in particular because, when watching that scene, it evokes that Midwestern winter so effectively, but we can still see the actors. We can still see the expressions. We can still see the sets. We can still see what they're wearing. Like, all of that still really comes through. All right, so to get into the audience questions before we got to wrap up, they started with a big one. How do you plan to use generative artificial intelligence, AI, to help you with your work? So I know this is a big issue in Hollywood right now. Anybody with thoughts or who's done it or is thinking about doing it or been approached about doing it?
I have tried unsuccessfully.
Okay.
You know what? This whole sort of telling the app, make this, and then let's see what comes out. And it's like, I say the words and it shows me something. I'm like, and I try and rephrase myself. And then 2 hours later, when I could have had pencil to paper, I'm still talking to my phone, trying to get it to generate some sort of image that I could take to a meeting. But I don't know, maybe I just don't speak the right language for the old AI overlords. But
You're saying that's not a talented collaborator that you have around you to support you and get the job done?
no, not yet, no.
Not. I know it's a big issue for our union right now, for all of our unions as we're in negotiations. And I have to say my experience has been exactly the same. Because you say something and you sort of look at it and you go, why are their eyes here? I mean, it all feels like a Picasso to me. And sometimes it's like, oh look, I see it's architecture. Maybe in the future it will be a tool we can use. And I also think it's a tool we as artists right now, everyone is, oh my God, it's going to take our jobs. It's not going to take our jobs because it doesn't function yet. It will. So I think we need to learn. I think the same thing happened when people started drawing on computers, right? AutoCAD, and everybody who hand drafted was like, oh my God, it's going to take, well, first of all, that took many years to happen. And it did, yes, and now it's a tool that we use. So it's not a tool that governs us. It's a tool that we use. And I think eventually the same thing will happen with AI, but I don't think it's there yet.
Yeah, like when I started, it was Photoshop years ago, and using that, I was like, oh, this is amazing. And then I've been using Procreate and different, drawing apps, but the AI thing, I'm just not on board with that yet.
I do a lot of sketching, my own designs, so, and specifically spacesuits right now. But it struck me, I mean, we've certainly been talking about it a lot, but it struck me as I'm working through my sketch work and my iterations and what I'm looking for. It's like, oh wow, I'm my own AI, really, in terms of how I consume research, how I look for research, how I'm sort of picking and choosing and then putting things together. But the thing that's different about me is that I know the human body. I know how to fit a human body. I know, what happens at the arm's eye and getting that nice fit in there, and how to structure a garment and how to pattern a garment. And from years, 30 years of working with the human body. So I feel from our point of view, we're a long way off of sort of replacing ourselves, that's for sure. There's some uses there, but I feel like we all actually function already like that type of program. I don't know. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, no, for us, we're sort of already doing it in a way. We're very computer heavy, very software heavy in my art department. We're running Unreal Engine and we're rendering out of Twinmotion almost exclusively now. So for us, they're all tools, and there's an AI component to these things. When you're running Unreal, you practically feel like it is AI because you're telling it to just add textures and do things that seem like way beyond what a concept artist would do in Photoshop or whatever. But nobody is really feeling occluded by this. All it is a tool to help you. The people are still there. They're just using a new tool, just as Victoria mentioned. 20 years ago, people were starting to use, AutoCAD or MiniCAD or Vectorworks or whatever it was. So now this is a new tool to help us. And believe me, it has made us much, much more creative. We've been able to expand our worlds tremendously in what we're doing. And I don't feel threatened in any way. That's me personally, so I don't speak for everybody.
I would also say, really following from what Esther said about the human body, on the Wheel of Time, I had like 6 cutters and their teams creating costumes because everything was made from scratch. And you can't go to AI when you've got a costume on a mannequin or an actor and go, how can we change this bit so it fits that body better or works better for the character? It's a tool, as we're all saying, I think, for ideas. But the ideas are not real. They're not based on human bodies. They're based on fantastical, concepts. So I think it's interesting, but I don't think it's going to take over.
Midjourney, we actually used Midjourney last season. We tried to use it. And we generated some sets, but I have to say they were pretty bad. And the very next thing we did was go right back into our other way to get the sets as custom and exact as we needed them. So Midjourney is a great thing to maybe get a very quick little start, especially if you need to do it in a day, but it'll never satisfy you, just as Sharon's saying, it'll never really do the job you really need.
Can I just add? So I think first of all, it's a great question. I don't know whose question, or maybe it's everybody's question, maybe. But I think I went to a seminar recently and the presenter said, AI won't take your job, but someone who knows how to use AI will. And I think that is sort of the long and the short of it, ultimately. And I've been teaching myself Midjourney so that I can create artwork that I don't know how to draw, so I wouldn't be able to do that otherwise. But I remember when digital capture cameras came out and they said, oh, you're gonna put a camera on a tripod, hit the on switch, and an hour later there'll be a show. I've never worked with more people and more stuff. So often the future is unclear, and this particular question is really unclear. clear right now. But I think, as everyone has said, we'll all use it, and we'll all use it effectively, and it won't entirely replace humans.
The trick here, what John is saying is don't fear the future. Embrace the future, take a chance, step out, give it a shot. If it doesn't work, okay, it doesn't work.
People were afraid of the printing press. That was going to be the end of civilization, right? Here we are.
I mean, it still might be. Give it some time.
Yeah.
All right, I know we've barely scratched the surface on all of the incredible things that you guys do in your work, but thank you for being here. We're out of time. Thank you for Sony Pictures Television for putting us here. Please enjoy the rest of the festival, everybody, and thanks again.